Yeah, you want this?
I'm going to grab one of these.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mic check, testing, thank you. Cool, thank you, Zach, and thank you, Tristan, for the invitation. My name's Anil, and this talk is called Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. Gonna have some fun. I got about 150 slides, 24.5 minutes. Let's roll. Okay, I want to take you to London, and the year is 1993. And this is a story of hyperinflation you've probably never heard. This was my elementary school. This is my crew. It's me in the middle, clearly daydreaming about something very important. And at the back of our school, we had a field. And in that field, there were some trees. What kind of trees? Anyone know what these are? You just shout it out. Chestnuts, yes. They're actually a type of chestnut called the horse chestnut. Mildly poisonous, just so you know. And in the UK, these are called conkers. And so for a few months every year, kids would start using these as currency. A natural system of prices would emerge, and we'd engage in trade. But one day, we showed up to school, and disaster struck. They'd actually expanded the field. They doubled the size, doubling the number of trees, and doubling the supply of conkers. Calamity ensued. Prices didn't just double, they didn't just triple, they skyrocketed, and all economic activity ground to a halt. It was terrible. It was terrible. Kids were begging for school supplies, fights were breaking out, a communist party emerged out of nowhere to run for school government because apparently real communism hasn't been tried. I did not know that. Did you know that? So those who fared best were those quickest to change course and adapt. And the ones who dropped the chestnut in favor for what I believe personally is the greatest invention of the 20th century, ladies and gentlemen, the push pop. A round of applause for the push pop. Look at that beautiful artificial cylindrical goodness. And it's not dissimilar from other events in history. This has happened many times before, like in Siberia in the late 90s, where public school teachers were paid in bottles of vodka because the ruble was hyperinflating. So the point is, you have to be willing to change your mind when the world changes around you. Now, this is Howard Marks. He is the co-founder of Oaktree Capital Management. It's the largest distressed debt investor in the world. And in 2018, he would say, in the long run, I think Bitcoin will be shown not to have any substance. Fast forward to 2021, relative to gold, Bitcoin has advantages. You don't have to pay to store it, it's not challenging to send, and you can spend it. So Howard changed his mind. Good on him. This is Ray Dalio, co-founder of Bridgewater, the largest hedge fund in the world. 2023. Bitcoin has no relation to anything. It's not an effective store of wealth. 1 year later, I want to have some hard money like gold and Bitcoin. So Ray changed his mind. All right, everyone's favorite, Larry Fink, CEO, co-founder, and chairman of BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the world. I think about $12.5 trillion at last count. 2017, Bitcoin just shows you how much demand for money laundering there is. 2024, as you know, I was a proud skeptic. My opinion 5 years ago was wrong. I believe Bitcoin's a legitimate financial instrument. I look at it as digital gold. So Larry changed his mind. Finally, we have Michael Saylor, executive chairman and co-founder of Strategy, the largest corporate holder of Bitcoin in the world. Famously tweeted 2013, Bitcoin's days are numbered. And by 2020, he would state, it took me 15 hours of research to determine that Bitcoin was the best money ever invented. So I've given you 3 examples among thousands in history of a harder money emerging, being adopted, and obsoleting the incumbent. All right, let's move along to better. And I want to take you to France, and it's the 1800s, and these structures are popping up all over the country. This is the Chap Telegraph. And what this tower structure would do is they would be placed within line of sight of one another. There was a system of encoding messages, and their adjustable arms could be changed to relay a message. Now, the reason they were used is because they were faster than sending a message via horseback. Now, this was important, especially over rugged terrain and especially during war times. And by 1844, you had over 500 of these structures all throughout France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, connecting 29 cities all through a central hub of Paris. Now, all of that infrastructure was obsoleted by this little tiny invention and a wire. This is the electrical telegraph, and it was propelled because there was widespread adoption of Morse code a few years earlier, a system of encoding messages into dots and dashes. So, 1844, the same year that there's 500 of these structures all throughout France, the other side of the Atlantic, Samuel Morse is sending the first ever long-distance message via electrical telegraph between Baltimore and Washington. If we zoom out, here's the big trend that's taking place. We're moving from manual transmission of information to wired transmission of information. And this was a big deal. This was a really big deal because at the time, it took about 12 days to send a letter between London and New York. So the electrical telegraph offered significant advantages in speed. Now, Peter Thiel had a great quote in 0 to 1, and it was that you have to be 10 times better than the next best. This has now been popularized as the 10x improvement rule, and the reason you need to be 10 times better than the next, if you're a new technology, is because you have to compensate the user, because they're taking a risk if they're adopting something. It has to, really give them some kind of benefit. So the electrical telegraph was adopted because of its speed. And when this happens and it reaches a critical mass, there is a tipping point. The incumbent gets obsoleted, and this is the process of creative destruction. So the electrical telegraph obsoletes the chap telegraph, the telephone obsoletes the electrical telegraph, the cell phone obsoletes the telephone, and the smartphone obsoletes the cell phone. Cool. Another way to look at this is in terms of density. So density refers to storage capacity. And when we come up with a new way or system of encoding and storing text that is denser, we upgrade. When we discover a denser source of energy, we upgrade. And when we discover a denser way of storing value, we upgrade. Does anyone know what this stuff is? You can just shout it out. Oh, language, yes. Let's use the technical term. This is guano. I think you got that right. And that is the accumulated excrement of seabirds, bats, and seals. And there was a period in time when guano was a very highly prized commodity because it was the most effective fertilizer humans had ever discovered. It contained really high levels of potassium, phosphate, nitrogen. And countries would start fighting over guano on islands and shipping it back to their home countries. So much so that the US Senate actually passed the Guano Islands Act, so that if a US citizen landed on an uninhabited island containing guano, they could claim that for the United States. But by 1905, two German chemists, Carl Bosch and Fritz Haber, would pioneer a way to extract nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. That process would be industrialized, and it would lead to the manufacture of artificial fertilizer at scale. So this had major ramifications for global food production and a corresponding decline in starvation worldwide as well. Okay. This is Dr. John Gorey, and he is a physician in Florida. Now, he is attending a party in Florida around the same time that countries are fighting over islands of bird crap, and this party is being held by the French consul. And there's something a bit frustrating about this party, and that is the guests are stuck drinking warm wine. Because it's Florida, it's the middle of summer, where are you going to get ice? But John Gorey has a stunt that he's been planning for months. And he snaps his fingers, and out of nowhere stream a bunch of waiters carrying silver buckets containing ice and chilled champagne. Now, the guests are stunned. They can't believe it. Where did this guy get ice in the middle of summer and transport it to Florida? Well, little did they know it was made right there in Florida. Gorey would patent his invention, and this process would form the basis of modern refrigeration as we know it today. But not everyone was happy about that, because there was an entire industry dedicated to harvesting ice the natural way. Now, this was a powerful group. They would form an association, they would get organized, they would lobby governments, and they would espouse the dangers of consuming artificial ice and the benefits of consuming natural ice. So when you look at how ice used to be produced, it was only a matter of time before some enterprising individual came up with a way to manufacture pure ice at scale. Sorry. If you're wondering where the term cold storage comes from, that's it right there. And I hope this is starting to sound familiar. You have a naturally occurring commodity, very cumbersome and difficult to extract and transport, obsoleted by an industrial process where something is engineered to perfection. So guano mining in the age of synthetic fertilizers and harvesting ice in the age of modern refrigeration systems, it's as archaic as mining gold in the age of Bitcoin. All right, moving on to faster. So remember this chart from earlier of creative destruction we looked at? I'm going to strip away the gray line, the incumbent, and we'll just look at the adoption curve of a new technology. And you'll notice it's an S-curve. It follows 3 distinct periods. There's an incubation period, an inflection point where there's rapid growth, and then it matures at the end. Now, we can also layer on top the different cohorts of people who adopt a new technology. And they do so at different points in time because they have different risk tolerance. So you've got the innovators at one end, all the way to the laggards at the other. Whoa, Christine, careful with that salute. You're going to get in trouble. Here's a chart showing the adoption of various technologies in the US going about back 200 years. And what you'll notice is that they're starting to go vertical. Okay, these lines are getting steeper and steeper. So why is that? Let's walk through a quick example. And I want to take you from the humble candle all the way to the LED light bulb. And what we can see is that there were a number of iterative steps in between. It wasn't just one giant leap. Now, this happened over about 5,000 years, but if we look at the intervals of time between each jump, we see that it's speeding up. Okay, why is this? So you and I, we're deeply flawed for many reasons, but this particular one is we're very bad at predicting the future in that we look at things in linear terms. We expect steady, stable progress when it comes to technology. But technology is anything but, right? Because every new technology gets the benefit of standing on the shoulders of every existing technology combined. So it compounds. So you will always be standing at the precipice of great change. Now, this is known as the law of accelerating returns. It was coined by a man named Ray Kurzweil, a futurist, and he famously said that in this century, the 21st century, you're not going to see 100 years of change. You're going to see more like 20,000 years of change at today's rate. If you want a movie reference, it's like this scene on repeat. Okay, stronger. What does it mean to be stronger in the digital age? I've got one last story for you today, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to take you to Montreal, and the year is 1995. Coolio's Gangster's Paradise is playing on car stereos. Toy Story is in theaters. And it's also the year Amazon would ship its first book. And it's also where we're going to meet Steven. Now, Steven is a speed skater. And in Montreal in 1995, he is competing in a race. He's going to lose his footing. He's going to fall. Another competitor is going to try to jump over him. severing an artery in his thigh in the process, and Stephen will lose 3/4 of the blood in his body in 60 seconds. Now, don't worry, Stephen's going to be okay. He would survive. There's him getting carried out off the ice. He'd later receive 111 stitches. Doctors would suggest he never skate again. Fast forward 5 years. He is in Sydney. He's practice race. Once again, unfortunately, Stephen is going to have a fall. This time, he slides into the boards head first, breaking his neck. He would spend 100 days in this halo brace. Defying all odds, miraculously, somehow, I don't know, he qualifies for the Salt Lake City Olympic Games 18 months later. Amazing, right? Now, Stephen skates the 1,000-meter men's short track. And in his heat, he's going to win convincingly. Stuns everyone. No one can believe this is happening. He qualifies for the quarterfinals, and in the quarterfinals, only the first 2 races are going to progress. Stephen finishes a respectable 3rd. Not bad, but pack your bags. It's time to go home. But wait! One of the first 2 races gets disqualified. Stephen is now 2nd, progressing to the semifinals. Amazing, amazing. Now his luck gets out of hand. Everyone in that race, barring Stephen, would fall over on the final stretch. Stephen would win, progressing to the final. So, from 18 months earlier, broken neck, in a brace, now in the final of the 1,000-meter men's short track Salt Lake City Olympic Games. Now, he's got to come up with a plan, because he's exhausted at this point. And he says, "It was the oldest bloke in the field. I thought I might as well stay out of the way, be in last place, and hope that some people get tangled up." So here's a still from the race. There's Stephen, way back at the end. Now, these other 4 competitors, they're all younger than him, they're all fitter than him, they're all faster than him. And they all want to win. They're not racing for silver. They're much younger, they're much more hungry, but Stephen has a lot of wisdom now that they do not have. And on the final turn, they take a spill. Stephen skates through, and he would win Australia's first ever gold medal at a Winter Olympics. Amazing, right? It's absolutely remarkable. I remember in Australia at the time, his face was plastered everywhere. We even put him on the 45-cent postage stamp, which then became the 50-cent stamp, the 55-cent stamp, 60-cent stamp, oh my God, $1, $1.10, and $1.50 finally. Thank God inflation is transitory, and we've seen the end of that. Fundamentally, what this story is about is one of resilience. Think of the major infrastructure that runs your life, from your phones, to electricity, to travel, to information, to water. You expect it to be there for you 24/7. And the more reliable it is to you, the more dependent you become on it. It is a feedback loop. So what does this have to do with Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin, like Stephen, does not go down. In fact, Bitcoin has not gone down in over 10 years. And this is a really big deal, because when you compare and contrast it to other payments networks, banking networks, information networks, communication networks, they're all making all kinds of trade-offs to optimize for speed, cost, or reach. And they don't understand that the game is indestructibility. These are the components that make up a Bitcoin full node or validating node, and the network comprises of these nodes. And what you'll notice is they're all commonly available parts. So anyone who wants to is free to build a node, to then validate Bitcoin's supply, validate Bitcoin's entire history, validate their own holdings, and tens of thousands of people are choosing to do just that. So Bitcoin's reached a critical threshold now as a network where you cannot shut it down. The genie is out of the bottle. So Bitcoin has now found its place as a global utility for transferring value between any 2 parties, anywhere on Earth, and in any amount. So remember this quote from earlier from Peter Thiel, when he said you have to be 10 times better than the next to reach broad adoption? Well, we know that money is a bit different. Money is a winner-take-all game. And when you find something that perfectly and permanently solves your problem, well, you no longer need the second best. Which is why you no longer need the second best treatment for epilepsy. You no longer need the second best formula for house paint. And you certainly don't need the second best storage method for sovereign wealth. So with that, Bitcoin is harder money because it's better technology. It will experience faster adoption because it has a stronger network. Thank you very much.